Day number 2 in the week. Tuesday is here, and boy, as always, we're glad to welcome you aboard the AM show. My name is Benjamin Akakwa. I'm always in good company doing this together with Bernice Abubedu-Lansa. From us to you, thank you for making the time. Now, coming up this morning, I'll be serving you the news in a bit, letting you know what's been happening across the length and breadth of Ghana. And then right after that, we get into the news review. And energy analyst, also aspirant as a flag bearer of the MPP, Kojo Poku, joins us for a conversation. But then from there, we get into sports, and right after sports, the big stories. And our major story today, our take on Ghana's economy. Now, we've given you the genesis. Now, we're giving you from hero to zero. That is what we're going to be contemplating as far as Ghana's economy is concerned. Our latest hotline documentary, A Nation That Begs. Now, as you can see in your shot, that is the outline that we have for you. And those who are going to be joining us for that conversation, we have Professor William Pepra, Professor of Finance, Andrews University in Michigan. We also have Dr. Richmond Echiahene, who will also be joining the conversation, Dr. Theo Champong, and Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah. All of these gentlemen join us for the conversation. Dr. Priscilla Chumisi-Baffour as well, Economics Department of the University of Ghana. So they'll join us for that all-important conversation about how we've been begging, are still begging, and likely could be begging into the future, and what the way forward is. After that, we'll be talking about the National Science and Math Quiz. It's been hotting up, so to speak. We've been in the eastern region, we've been in the upper east region, the northern region, and today we'll be taking you elsewhere as we get into what the schools have been doing on the front of the National Science and Math Quiz. That's what the show looks like today, with a few drive-bys in between. Stick and stay. We'll be back with the news. Thank you for staying with us. Let's get into the news now. And in our first story, former President John Dramani Mahama is declaring that the National Democratic Congress's candidate for the Asin North by-election, James Gyakye, will not end in jail, rallying constituents to vote for him to return to Parliament. Mr. Quayson is facing charges including perjury and making false declarations, with his criminal trial set to take place on a daily basis from today. But speaking at a campaign durbar, Mr. Mahama insisted the case against the NDC's candidate had no basis.
This man
has not committed any crime. The only alleged crime they claim he has committed is supporting this constituency. If everyone here was granted a free visa to Canada, no one would be left in this community. Maybe you would only have the chiefs. Due to worsening economic conditions, many people would have left. However, this man, who used to hold Canadian citizenship, has voluntarily renounced it to serve his constituents. Yet, this government is making him regret that decision. They are spreading propaganda that any vote for him will not count because he will certainly be in prison. I, John Mahama, stand here to refute those claims and say that James Gyakye will never be in prison. But those who call for his imprisonment rather will be the ones to be dealt.
It's very surprising and strange to me that we preach one thing and we do the other. We talk about democracy, but we don't respect the choice of the people. This we all know. In 2020 December, I won this election fair and clear, and then there's been maneuvering due to the imbalance. The status of the Parliament or the legislature right now. they all understand that if given the legislature numbers, if one side of the party was higher than the other, in other words, let's say NDC or MPP had 140 and the other had like 135, we won't be facing this. It is the situation of the House, because for the first time in Ghana's elections, we had 137.
Yeah.
You know, but in a true democracy, you work with consensus. You build consensus. You work with the other side. In fact, Ghanaians spoke that they don't want one party rule to control, like give and winner takes all. That is why they gave us that mandate.
Yeah.
But it seems as though they don't want to respect the people's choice. And they will do everything to maneuver to reduce the number.
In our next story now, Kumasi Mayor Sam Pine has reiterated the Assembly's decision to restrict the movement of Pragya riders in the central business district of that city. The restriction, which was supposed to take effect last Friday, was delayed following a petition from the Pragya Union requesting a review of the designated routes. Now, though the Assembly is yet to meet the leadership of the Pragya Union, Mayor Sam Pine emphasizes the importance of limiting their movement.
Well, definitely, because we are looking at several issues. One, safety on the roads. When you go to Konfanochi, we have the program with the Bloomberg Philanthropies International. That's the big RS, the Bloomberg Initiative for Global Road Safety, of which Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly is a key member of that. And as part of that, the last two reports that we gave out to the Road Safety Commission and the authorities and the MTTD, one major cause of accident in Kumasi is due to the presence of Pragya. And when you go to the hospitals, the casualties there, a majority of the accident casualties there are from the operations of Pragya within the metropolis. And if you don't take measures, apart from that, the inconvenience to other road users, the recklessness on the roads and all that. So we needed to take comprehensive steps to make sure that, yes, these matters are resolved.
Now, the St. Paul's Primary and Junior High School at Soy in the Bolgatanga municipality of the Upper East region is in a deplorable state. 60 years since it was first constructed, the basic school has seen no rehabilitation. Its walls have deep cracks, and some of the classrooms are now overcrowded, making it unconducive for learning. Correspondent Albert Sori reports.
The St. Paul's Primary and Junior High School at Soy, here in the Bolgatanga municipality, is one of the oldest schools in the Upper East region. The school started under a tree in the 1960s and was later adopted by some Catholic missionaries who constructed a school block for it in the 1970s. Since then, no rehabilitation has been done to this school, despite the crucial role it has played in educating some prominent people of the Upper East region. The St. Paul's Primary and Junior High School, Soy, is now 60 years old and a pale shadow of its once glorious self. Deep cracks are seen on some of the walls, and some of its roofing sheets are on the verge of getting blown off by the wind. The school's population of nearly 400 pupils has outgrown its infrastructure, leading to overcrowding in some of the classrooms. In the lower classes, enrollment is dwindling due to the poor state of the school. The pupils here are not happy.
The roof is bad as we are learning. If rain is falling, it soaks some of our books.
We lack furniture, especially the farm trays. Some of them sit on the floor. Some use blocks for furniture. We lack textbooks for our teachers. We eat around anyhow because we don't have washrooms. So we are appealing on the government to help us.
A 2-story, 9-unit classroom block project was started by the Old Students Association in collaboration with the PTA, but the project has now stalled due to lack of funds.
It happened that a philanthropist came and then at this building for us as a computer lab for them. But because of the classroom challenge, we have decided to move the computers away from here, and this has now been converted to be a classroom. The old students of St. Paul Primary and Junior High School, they started something. We have appealed for funds for some of the students who are not even available to assist us get a classroom. The classroom situation here is affecting so many of them. Even attendance is so bad.
The Soin St. Paul's Primary and Junior High School is celebrating its 60th anniversary in November this year. The Old Students Association of the school are therefore using the opportunity to rally support to give the school a facelift.
After going through this celebration successfully, we should be able to come out and solicit for funds so that we can get some classrooms to add to the existing blocks that are there so that the children can sit and learn comfortably. Again, I would like to appeal to my colleagues, the old students, and any other well-meaning Sun citizen who are capable of helping the school to come forward so that we will relieve them of this stress. Because as we are all aware, where the environment is not good, teaching and learning is not going on well. Especially the old block, it is so dilapidated that if we don't take care, one day, instead of celebrating the 60th anniversary, we will be celebrating deaths of our children.
Reporting for Joy News, Albert Sorry, Bolgatanga.
Let's talk health now. And the lead advocate for persons with sickle cell, Charlotte Owusu, wants government and the Ghana Health Service to critically pay attention to sickle cell advocacy as a means of preventing the increase in sickle cell patients in the country. She says the barriers to quality healthcare services in Ghana make prevention the surest way of curbing the rising numbers. Elvis Washington reports.
June 19 each year is a day set aside as a Sickle Cell Awareness Day. The awareness is observed each year to throw light on the need for the public to know about the sickle cell disease. This year's theme for the awareness campaign is building and strengthening global sickle cell communities, formalizing newborn screening, and knowing your sickle cell disease status with the hashtag Break the Chain, Get Tested, Know Your Status. In Ghana, the day was observed in Tema, where volunteers were made to test to know their statuses. Madam Charlotte Owusu, the lead advocate who launched this year's campaign, mentioned the need for all to get tested.
25% are carriers of the disease, with 23% who are healthy carriers, AS and AC, and with 2% who are the sickle cell disease people, that is the SS and the SCs. We have 75 people who are AA. They don't have the sickle cell at all in them. And so conveniently we can put, you can easily look for, if you are in the 25%, you can easily look for a partner from the 70%, 75%. So we all were telling them it's necessary that you know, because the situation as it is, we are not too good we are not well versed in the care of sickle cell. There are so many lapses in the system and people are dying. My daughter died.
Madam Charlotte Owusu cautioned people from believing that their statuses could change through prayers and deliverance.
No, don't look there at all. No means. People say they'll pray and it will change. I wouldn't believe that. It doesn't change, my dear. It is like that till thy kingdom you go.
A retired dietitian, Madam Margaret Hansen, who graced the occasion, mentioned that it is important that people eat well to prevent diet-related diseases.
If you eat well, you can prevent not only looking after sickness, But a lot of these, what we call diet-related diseases, can be prevented. Number one, diabetes, hypertension, cholesterol, liver disease, renal problems, where you have to pay a lot of money to do dialysis. These can all be prevented if you eat well. At Nabita, they call me moderation. I'm not saying don't eat, but everything in moderation. I must say, food contributes a lot to our health.
For Joy News, my name is Elvis Washington, reporting from Tema.
Now, residents of Doyumu in the Shai Osudoku district say they will still protest the bad state of their roads, despite an assurance by the district chief executive that rehabilitation works are ongoing. The residents say they want the 15.8-kilometer long stretch asphalted. We have details in this report by Carlos Caloni.
These earth-moving machines were seen busily working on the stretch when Joy News visited at Doyumu Road Friday afternoon. The District Chief Executive, DC, of Shai Osudoku District Assembly, Fred Ofe, who was on the stretch, explained to Joy News the rationale behind the rehabilitation works.
The road from Doyumu Junction to Doyumu has become very bad of late, of which our people also wanted to demonstrate. So Assembly found the need of it that we have to come and do spot improvements as we can do all, so that it could be motorable for the community people to be applying it. That's why the Assembly has come in, and then we collaborated with one or two quarries who were willing to give us material to put it on the road. And so far, that is what we are seeing and experiencing. Thank God, the contractor that is working on the Akosumo, Ashama to Akosumo, I met them, I discussed with them, and they've also given us some machinery.
But the youth of the town would not have any of that. They say they want the road asphalted, maintaining they will go ahead with their planned demonstration tomorrow, June 20, in spite of the rehabilitation works.
We are not saying they should come and fill potholes or do something. We said they should fix our road. We need the road to be constructed, an asphalt road, because this is where the quarries are. We are not happy. This is even worse than what we have. When it rains and we have erosion, and then the dust wash away, it will be left with the stones. And these stones are very, very big. Your cars can get damaged because of these stones. We are having a demonstration on the 30th. Definitely, it will come on. That is Tuesday.
What they are doing is not a permanent solution to our problem. We need a permanent road to be constructed. If not anything, we are not asking for much, but an asphalt should be constructed here. We are suffering. It has affected business so long. Before their cars used to pass here, but now they don't pass here. Our mothers who used to sell at the roadside, nobody is buying their food because the cars are not using this road.
We are telling the government that on the 20th of this month, we are doing a demonstration against the government. All we are saying is that you should come and fix our road for us. We will not stop. Nothing will stop us. We will go ahead and do the demonstration. Nobody can intimidate us. We are ready for that, and then we will still come ahead and do the demonstration.
The DC, however, maintained the move is an interim measure since the contractor has abandoned site, claiming he has not been paid.
We are not doing it to put a bitumen on it because Assembly funding can even not construct a kilometer of road, but we'll make sure we make it accessible until the contractor comes back to site. What the contractor is saying is he hasn't been paid, and that is why he is not coming back on site.
Appealing to the Ministry of Roads to intervene, the DC said with only 2.5 tarred roads in the entire district, the situation is contributing to insecurity in the area.
We only have about 2.5 kilometers of road that is only bitumen from Ayikuma to Asebi. The stretch from, let me say, from Asebi to Doyumu Junction is bad. From Doyumu to Kodiabe through to Agomeda, bad. From Dodua to Afienya, very bad. All these roads have become a death trap for all of us. The crime rate is increasing in the district because of this bad nature of road. So I'll plead for the central government to listen to our plight, and then they come and attend to us.
Reporting from Doyumu, my name is Carlos Caloni for Joy News.
Well, on that note, we cap off the news. Stay with us. The news review is up next with energy analyst Kojo Poku. We'll be right back. It's so good to have you back on the AM show. Well, let's get into the newspaper review. We're joined by Kojo Poku. He is an energy analyst. I'll be getting connected with him shortly. But, of course, this segment always brought to us by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, and they say the end to chronic disease. I'll tell you why shortly. Now, they're offering free services in these two categories, and you must take advantage of it. If you're a man, have you ever checked your prostate? Do you know what role your prostate plays? It's part of the reproductive system. Without it, you could live. You would likely live if it weren't maybe malignant and hadn't given you cancer or something of the sort, but with some consequences. You don't want to get there, which is why you ought to take preventive measures. What food you eat, what activities you engage in, what checks you run. You can check your prostate at Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic for free. If you're a woman, do you know your level of fertility? Do you know about the other surrounding issues that impact your fertility? You could have fibroids and you wouldn't know it, and that could impact your fertility. For you as well, you can get fertility screening for free at Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. Now, guess what? They're dotted across the length and breadth of the country, making it easier for you to reach to them. So if you're here in Accra, all you have to do is go to Spintex opposite the Shell signboard. If you're in Kumasi, Krunumabwe here behind the Angel Educational Complex. If you are in Takra, the Anaje Estates is where you can locate them. If we come back to the Greater Accra region, Tema, they are in Community 22. Then there's Techiman Hanswa and Esiama in Zima. I'm sure I've whetted your appetite enough. Call them on these numbers: 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease, but just the commencement of our news review. Now we're out with our latest edition, the latest installment of A Nation That Begs. This second part is called From Hero to Zero. I'm putting it to all of you out there watching me this morning. Ghana started so well. Even before the colonialists, the imperialists came here, from the Portuguese to the Dutch, the Dutch, I should say, to all the others who came here, to the British, we had it all. And one thing that gets me thinking, even when we were mining, engaging in exploitation of resources, we did it in a certain way. Some would say, oh, now we have all this technology and equipment and all of that, which is why maybe we are seeing galamsey and all of that. But there was responsible mining back then. We still had the gold and all those resources, but our forefathers were more conscious of what they did to the environment. Look at us today. But even beyond that, we were colonized. We went through that phase. At the point when we gained independence, we had not so much, because some lies have been told about what Kitty, the Osajafo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah had. We didn't have that much. He had to work to get it. That was how we got the Akosombo Dam. It was through his ingenuity that we got the Tema motorway. That is how we started Tema. But we had quite a bit, comparatively. That's why we were able to help countries like Guinea. Okay? We were pushing for the liberation of the African continent, Osajafo and his CPP back then, across the continent. That was how he was able to do that. Some would later claim that he had expended resources he could have used in Ghana, trying to engage in becoming the leader of Africa. But the point is, like he said, without independence for the rest of the African continent, our independence would be meaningless. Comparatively, at the time, we rubbed shoulders with India. India, look at the disparity. It's like night and day when you consider India and where they are technologically. Well, population-wise, they've always been big. Economy, one of the biggest in the world now. Look at us. Yet comparatively at the time, we could rub shoulders with them on certain fronts. Malaysia and others, South Korea. Yet look at where they progressed to and where we have tapered off at. So today, I want to get your feel of why we are where we are. Why are we where we are, especially economically speaking? Former President Mahama said after his IMF deal, we would never go back to the IMF. Well, I guess he was supposing he would remain in power and that situation would stabilize. Who knows what would have happened? But at least we know that the entity that took over from him, the MPP, that told us they were going to move us from taxation to production, and in very recent times that we would never go to the IMF because we're a proud people and blah, blah, blah. Here we are with the IMF one more time. What do you think? I want us to start the conversation from here. So you shoot me a message. Let me know what you think about why we keep ending up here. The UK, the British, sometime in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, ended up with an IMF program. And they said, like the Spaniards would say, nunca jamás, never again. And they stuck to it. One experience was enough. We've been there 17 times. What is wrong with us? We have to have these conversations in our homes, in our schools, wherever, because the misleadership, whether it's the NDC or the MPP, impacts you and me. Food for thought. You can share your thoughts with me via the live stream. And when we get into the hard issues with our guests, be sure to call after that so we know what you're thinking. But let me welcome aboard Kojo Poku. A very good morning to you, sir. Well, it appears Kojo still hasn't made tracks in terms of joining us. So we'll start on the business front this morning. The graphic business says, Ghana's IMF program implementation, businesses and households to feel the heat. And how? Well, businesses and households would bear the brunt when the government begins full implementation of the conditionalities of the IMF extended credit facility, an economic expert has cautioned. He said, though the adjustments and policy initiatives were good and would help the country to return to a growth path, the austerity measures in the program would hurt individuals and businesses. Disclosing this to the graphic business in an exclusive interview, a professor of economics and finance at, I thought it would be on the next page, but it's all the way on page 20. Let me quickly get that. So at pressing, okay, so why has the story been mixed up? Graphic business. Looks like the story is all jumbled up. Okay, so I think it actually starts from page 6 before it goes back. Yes. So it indicates it's on page 6, but there's a continuation from page 20 as well. University of Ghana Professor Godfred Bokpin said the targeting implementation of the government's program was poorly done. Just to quote him, he says, if we cut capital expenditure, it will affect growth because, for instance, we wouldn't be able to build roads. And looking at the bad nature of our roads, that would be a disincentive. Contractors would also not have money to pay their employees and suppliers, so it would have an impact, he explained. Again, he said the government's plan to reduce transfers to statutory funds under the ECF would also contribute to the impending economic hardship on individuals and households as well as businesses. He also talks about the public sector. He says we would not be able to recruit into the public sector as much as we could when we were on our own, and one key adjustment would be wage freezes. And when that happens, it means the increments in wages would not happen significantly because the government wants to make savings. So businesses, it's not that they will feel the heat. They are feeling the heat. We get them talk to us all the time. The Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and all of that, the AGI, among others. The people on the street, Abasokai and others, they're all up in arms because this is not the best time to go for a bank loan. I'm not trying to, sabotage any bank, but we all know it. People are fleeing because guess what? The conditions are not exactly the best. People will still go, and I'm not saying it's the worst possible situation, but in these economic times, and with the banks trying to avoid bad debts, okay? I know a few things that I cannot say on air, but with the banks trying to avoid bad debts, with the economic situation, with the policy rate, and everything else, people on facilities, variable facilities. I know people who used to take a chunk of their salary to pay for their monthly facility requirements. Now, the entirety of their salary is not enough to meet it. And so that will be taken once it hits their account, and then they must now find money to top up. So if you're a business person and you've fallen into such a pit, what do you think that would mean? For households as well, we've seen inflation spike again. Now, some may say that it is decelerating, but it is decelerating at a slower rate. We hit over 50%. It has fallen to around 42 point something percent. But that is another increment because in recent times, month on month, it went up by a little. With all of these dynamics, we cannot avoid the fact that we are feeling the heat. So the finance minister will say, our credit books look better. Our balance looks better. Our credit sheet as a country may look a bit better in terms of what we can afford to do with what we have within a certain spate of months. But the reality is that we have a long way out of this hole. How we'll get out, only God knows. And that question again about the continuous stay of Ken Ofori-Atta at post. I've become a bit indifferent to it because even the members of parliament on the majority side who at a point started a drive chickened out. Yeah, I said it. They chickened out. So it is what it is. Is it a means to an end? You started a process. Mr. President, though, promised that after securing the deal, Ken Ofori-Atta would make tracks. He's still at post. So what does this mean for respect for the people, for sticking to one's word, and for ensuring that the economy is stable? Because guess what? Who mans the economy also comes with a certain baggage or positive effect. Why do you think his name just escapes me? I'll try to remember. The Ghanaian, the British Ghanaian who became Exchequer, finance minister, if you like, in the UK. Why do you think he got ousted? There was so much pressure, his own prime minister had to say goodbye to him. It appears here we don't have that policy of fire and hire. I hired you. You are not meeting the requirements. You simply are not on top of the job. I fire you. We don't have that culture here. Oh, he helped during the campaign. Oh, this person did that. Oh, family members. Let's get into other dynamics now. And NPRA seeks support from development partners. Now, external debt negotiations. Experts worried about slow pace. Minister confident of deal soon. Let me go back there, talk more about the economy. Of course, the graphic business focuses on that. Economists and experts have raised issues over what they describe as the slow speed of the country's external debt negotiations. They believe this could derail the objectives of the 3-year extended credit facility program with the IMF. Now, the government is targeting an external debt relief of $10.5 billion between 2023 and 2026 as it engages its external creditors for debt restructuring. The external creditors include both bilateral and commercial creditors. The government announced the suspension of debt service on external commercial obligations on December 19, 2022, and has since then been engaging with them on a debt restructuring. The government is also seeking to restructure debts totaling $14 billion, out of which $13 billion are in bonds with external commercial creditors. Now, in an interview with the graphic business on the sidelines of the Institute of Fiscal Studies Assessment of the IMF program, Senior Research Fellow Dr. Said Wachi said the restructuring of the external debt component of the country's debt had not been given the urgency it deserved. Quoting him, he says, as we stated in our review of the 2023 budget statement and the debt restructuring program, given that the external debt component has serious exchange rate implications, the main trigger of the current macroeconomic instability, we expected the government and its partners to pay greater attention to the external debt. It is clearly visible from the approved program that the external debt restructuring is critical in helping the country meet its large fiscal and external financing needs. And these are some of the matters we're talking about. Kojo Poku, an energy analyst and a man of many things, joins the conversation. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing well. Let's get into the matters, weighty matters I have raised already. Ghana's IMF program implementation, businesses and households to feel the heat. They are feeling the heat already. That is Professor Godfred Bokpin, lecturer at the University of Ghana. And I just read the story about the external debt negotiations and how, according to senior research fellow Dr. Said Boakye, he says, and he is with the Institute of Fiscal Studies, he says we're going at a very slow pace and this is impacting the economy. Any quick thoughts on these two matters?
Yes, we've always known that the external debt is the bigger chunk of our debt. And that is the one that we service by having to change cities into FX. As a result, it has always been a problem because you remember when the city now took a nosedive, it was because we were now buying a lot of FX to be able to service the interest on our loans. Unless we are able to have a concrete restructure of that debt, we are still not out of the woods yet. Remember when we spoke last week, I was a bit furious when some government officials went to the UK and said that we are back on track, when clearly you have just entered the IMF and you have not even finished with the restructuring of the external debt. Look, will you go and borrow money from somebody in good faith? And these international bond markets, they are people whose money they've invested. So you go and take investors' money. And because you mismanage your situation, you want to go back and restructure the yields of those investors. They don't take kindly to those things. So when you say you are back, and don't think that you'll be back in that market for investors to now have confidence to give you back money anytime soon. So look, to have a comprehensive restructure of that external debt is very important because it will give clarity to what we now have to pay, how much we have to pay, and when that payment is due. As we speak now, we've defaulted since, I think, November last year, and I don't know when we're going to start servicing our external debt. And these are concerns for investors whose money are stuck in these bonds. Funny enough, I thought that only external people invested in some of these bonds, but there are local businessmen who also invested in some of these external bonds. So it's also affecting the local businesses and the business environment. There is no money. Me and you have spoke various times about squeezing water from a rock. That's the situation that we have now. The non-oil proceeds, which the IMF document is very heavy on. You know, for me, I would have thought that they would have concentrated heavily on the energy sector, and I've seen the finance minister putting something out there that they are going to restructure and try to concentrate to bring us back from where we are by revamping the energy sector. The upstream, which is the reason we got ourselves into this problem, the oil find, which we have promised Ghanaians will transform this country from what we were in 2006, 2007, to the greater heights 10 years down the line. It's been almost 15 years, and we are still where we were before we found oil. Okay, so we need to pay attention to the energy sector, especially upstream, increase our volumes in the upstream. Today, we are still doing 120,000 barrels a day, where we should have been somewhere around 400,000 barrels a day, 10 years or 12 years into first oil. But we are not. To keep piling on taxes on the average citizen is not the way to get ourselves out of the economy that we have. But unfortunately, that seems to be the way forward now.
Well, you were talking about when we started our default. That was on December 19, 2022. So it was in December last year in terms of not meeting our external debt service obligations. But do you agree substantially that businesses and households are feeling the heat on the back of the economic dynamics? And what would you like to see moving forward in the next few months before the next batch or tranche of the IMF money comes through? Briefly on that, what would you like to see?
Well, the best way forward is to give some reliefs and reduce the taxes, but we've done the opposite. Like I said, the IMF program is heavy on non-oil receivables. And when you look at non-oil receivables, taxation is the only option that we have on non-oil receivables. Okay, so what I wanted to get, look, we've coming out of the pandemic. We've coming out of a recession around the world, sort of, where because of the Ukraine-Russia war. So look, we're really at the bottom. What we need is to grow wealth in the economy. The only way to grow wealth is to basically reduce taxes. But we are doing the opposite. We are really piling on taxes, and I don't know where we want the growth to come from. Because the only way we can grow is if the industry grows, if the citizenry have purchasing power to buy more. And that's the only way the economy will grow. But for you to be taxing more when you've not increased salaries, you've not increased the disposable income of the individuals. That means they buy less, industry feels the pinch because they are not producing more. As a result, you don't grow the economy.
Well, let's get into some other stories very quickly from the graphic business. World Bank June Food Security Update, that is on pages 4 and 21. It's an interesting update, and if you look at the real food inflation heat map and you look at the food inflation heat map, you would see where the world is, where Africa lies, and how the situation really looks. You can get the charts from there. It's something that you would find rather interesting. But let me get into some of these other stories. And then there's also that editorial, Ghana's program with the IMF and its impact on you, something else that you should be checking out. On page 8, business resilience strategies for the second half of 2023. There's also this bit on corporate governance and ethics on page 10. Now, let's go to the back page. Why corporate sponsorship is vital for the growth of sport. And corporate sponsorship is a form of support non-profits receive from corporations for an event or a project. The benefits are twofold. Non-profits receive the help they need to continue serving their missions, while the company receives tax deductions and a positive boost or mileage. In sports sponsorship, $50 million a year can quickly cross the table for big clubs such as FC Barcelona or athletes like LeBron James. The European Football Championship also showed that an investment like that of TikTok, Booking.com and co. can be worthwhile because sport not only receives a lot of attention from an entertainment point of view, but also has an enormous social relevance. I just wanted to bring this up to cap off the graphic business. Why? I'm sure you've heard that Mediama, which won the Ghana Premier League, the male Ghana Premier League, got 300,000 Ghana cedis, about, is it $26,000 or $30,000 thereabouts, the equivalent of about 300,000 Ghana cedis. And of course, there has been talk about the sums that the GFA got from those who sponsored the Ghana Premier League, sponsored the entirety of the year, and whether it was fitting what we were giving out. But what do you make of our sports in terms of sponsorship? When the GNPC has gone into sponsoring the Black Stars, we have criticized them. Apt? What is your take?
Well, look, we have not grown wealth in the country. And if you don't have wealth in the country, things like corporate social responsibility suffers. And when you look at sponsorship, it would in a way come under corporate social responsibility. The sports for me in Ghana, we've just gone from high to a very low. I've always told you that I'm a House of Folk fan. And not only am I a House of Folk fan, I was a die-hard phobia. I would drive from Accra to Kumasi when Kotoko is playing Haas, or when Haas is playing in Kumasi, or I'll go to the stadium in Accra when Haas is playing any team. I don't even know that one player in Haas today. And the point where, for me, I went off was when Haas now won. Remember when we won the league and we went on to win the African Cup. And
right.
we were given $1
million
at it. Yes, we were given $1 million at the time. And that time it was the man who owns Bus Stop. What's his name? The chairman of the club was our good friend who owns Bus Stop.
Harry Zakor.
Harry Zakor, yes. And when we later found out the salaries of these players, you know what? I said, I can't give that emotion to football when the players who are playing are paid these paltry sums, okay? Because it is not fair. And that is why today, the new slave trade, the new human trade is sports agents. That's the new slave trade. Because if you're looking at players in Ghana whose team has won and they are getting $26,000, how much bonuses do you think they will get? So it basically diminished the whole football thing in Ghana. But it has a very big potential, huge potential, okay? But individuals have just made themselves that is where they are also going to butter their bread. As you rightfully said, GFA must have gotten more money. What they used it for, I don't know. Now, you now find out that the club and the players who entertain me and you are getting the short end of the stick, which is unfair. The reason corporates are not sponsoring is because the viewership, the likability, the eyeball has gone down. Every corporate sponsor would want to be part of something big. You don't have to tell a corporate sponsor where to put their money. They will chase you for it. Okay? So if the football environment was driving the thousands of supporters to the stadium like it was in the past, corporate sponsorship will follow automatically. The TV rights will follow automatically because it will be a big deal. You don't need corporate sponsorship when the league and all the football has diminished. You should see some of our pitches. National Sports Council, non-existent. Okay, so in fact, the fundamental basis of this thing is wrong because when you see some of the parts where some of these players play, it's not fit for telecasting. How are you going to show on DSTV some of the pitches that we have in Ghana where we play our league? It's disgusting. Okay, so we need to invest, and I think it starts from the Sports Council. Government should stop giving money to GFA. Okay, government should put money in the National Sports Council to develop the facilities for the football to be played. So the stadiums, we've all seen the stadia in Takoradi and the state is in today. Why have we put so much money in that stadia and it is left to rot the way it is being kept? So government should stop giving money to GFA, invest in National Sports Council to develop the facilities, and let's have good state-of-the-art stadia for these supporters to go and support their team, and let's bring up the team from that level. Let GFA fund for itself, because after all, it's a private organization. It's not a government organization.
Thanks for those thoughts. There are some comments coming through. I'll just share them briefly. So initially, I started the conversation when I was talking about the economy and how far we had come. Today, I'm sure you know, we're looking at the second installment of A Nation That Begs. This one we've captioned Hero to Zero. I was talking about where we had come from, the good stock we had come from, the promise we had at independence, and how it has all crumbled downhill. So some comments are coming through on the pain of missing out on them. Let me just take a few. Aaron Kokomisa says, the truth is only one. It is rather unfortunate that we are supposed to behave as if all was well or all were well, but it is not. Most citizens cannot afford to buy fruits to eat because of the price. Even the price of an avocado is 5 Ghana cedis. Do you know, recently, yes, you tried to get an avocado and some are as high as 15, 20 cedis. Kojopo, can you imagine that?
I don't buy. No, my brother, I don't buy. You see, that's the thing. It's a perishable good. So if I don't buy it, it will spoil. So leave it Nempro. Because I don't get that.
No, but how about those who are selling them? You can't say it's a leave it Nempro. How about those who are selling them?
Selling avocado for 15 cedis. How's that? Meanwhile, when it's in season, it's 3 for 5 cedis. So I mean, I don't buy. Look, avocado for me now is a luxury. When it's 3 for 5 cedis, I'll buy. If it's 1 for 15 cedis, I'll just eat my plantain or my yam like that. I don't even bother.
By the way, on that day, I went past. It was a filing past. I went past and I didn't buy. Because, Charlie, if you... Right now, the budget is really tight.
Don't make sense because he or she only went around the corner and plucked them from the house next door and then sit on the side of the road and tell you, oh, dollar kosro. Dollar, no.
But that's not fair, Kojo. If you say she went to the house next door, and even the person next door would probably sell it to her. So let's look at that. But the person is saying the government must find a better alternative to beat down prices of seasonal farm products to make it affordable for all. This one also says, Ben, you talk of development, yet you are unable to tell your listeners to pay taxes. Can you tell us the total numbers of Ghanaians who pay taxes and the rate at which communities are expanding, which need roads, hospitals, schools, with respect to this part of your messages, but that you do your listeners good by being fair? Thanks. Dennis Duku sent that. I had to just get back to you. Dennis, have you paid attention to the component of our taxes? Maybe you're not in this country. We have many more taxes. We're talking about nuisance taxes. In fact, are you aware that there's a 35% tax, importation levy, importation tax, and then VAT on sanitary products? I'm talking about pads, sanitary pads for women. Are you aware of that? It's considered a luxury, but is it a luxury? You're still paying for the COVID-19 levy also. Yeah. Why?
Yeah, but you see,
so if you talk about taxes, I agree with you to a certain extent, but it is that we are overtaxing those who are being taxed instead of expanding the net to the point where every Tom, Dick, and Harry, every Kwame, Kojo, Mansa is paying the tax so that not too many people are feeling the heat. It is said that if more people hold the sky, too many people will not feel shoulder pain or backache. So that is the point. So if you tell me that education on paying taxes, people are paying taxes. We're paying through the nose. Don't come and tell me about taxes. Kojo.
Ben, I think the education is that people have to understand direct and indirect taxes. Okay, maybe less people pay direct taxes, but everybody in Ghana pays
indirect taxes. In fact, when you purchase credits, you are paying indirect taxes. Everything.
Look, if you don't come out of your house and you put on electricity, you are paying indirect taxes. If everybody pays indirect taxes, so that one is the education we need to give. That is the direct taxes that we need. When you said widen the tax net, is widen the tax net for the direct taxes. But everybody pays the indirect taxes. But there's plenty today. When you go to restaurant to eat, and look at the bottom part.
I say, when you pass by any of these eateries, when you are done, if you don't want palpitations of your heart, don't look at the bill, the slip. Because if you do, and then you calculate the portion in taxes, Masa, Dennis Duku, don't even start this conversation. I'm sure you don't even want to go there. Trust me. This person got me riled up this morning. Like, seriously? Anyway, let's get into other stories.
It's education we need to give.
Daily Guide. I aborted Sarkodie's baby, Yvonne Nelson. I am not Yvonne Nelson, that book. Am I Benjamin Akakpo? Yes, I am. As for me, I am. She says she's not Yvonne Nelson. But some revelations. Peter Lajete is in there. Her father, so to speak. Sarkodie, Inyanya, the Nigerian artist. So many things happening. I don't know. Did you get a whiff of that book?
I won't read it.
I'm not saying. I've just followed excerpts of it because it's my work. It's out there. But
I don't do tabloid. I won't read tabloid. I'm too much of a serious person to read tabloid. I don't read tabloid.
Are you suggesting Yvonne Nelson is unserious?
I'm not saying she's unserious. I said don't read tabloid. It's not her person I'm talking about. It's the information that's being put out there for me is tabloid, and I don't read tabloid news.
All right. MPP's Akoto polls billboard crowd. Let's invest in Afrexim Bank, Kufuado said so. And AG rejects Actor Forcing payment plan. Let's get into those two. So, New Patriotic Party flag bearer aspirant Dr. Owusu Akoto has justified the small throng that accompanied him to file his nomination papers, claiming that he only garnered a dedicated crowd of believers in his bid. According to him, he is not intimidated by the massive crowds that have characterized the filing of nomination papers by other contestants. All right, let's just wrap from here with this story. I've noticed, however, that the Daily Guide newspaper has been very heavy on a certain personality, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, who is also aspiring to be flag bearer of the party. Maybe it is just me, but I've noticed the likes of, there's another paper that also has been pretty heavy over time. I don't know what the rest of you are doing. It appears. But anyway, maybe you can share your thoughts on that, and then the small crowd, so to speak, that Dr. Efria Akoto
Okay, so look, it's a private newspaper. Okay, it's a private newspaper, and
I get that. I'm not disputing it.
Well, so if they are paid newspaper. So when you pay them, they would now be heavy on you. They basically have to generate revenue to run the paper. So whoever is paying is the one getting the mention on the front page. So that's what everybody should think about. You see, we tend to look at newspapers as if newspapers are out there to basically serve the public good. They are there to serve their pockets. That's what the private newspapers, and I'm sure all newspapers.
And it's crucial you make mention of that, because these private ones, that's exactly what they are doing. That's why you would expect some balance from the Daily Graphics and the Ghanaian Times and the rest. But for the others,
but they are not. They won't do that. So for me, and again on the small crowd, look, I, Kojo Poku, will probably end up going there with like 2 or 3 people to submit my forms. If anybody think that because I went with 2 or 3 people to submit my forms, I don't have anybody across the country, so be it. You know, I honestly think that it's a bit disgusting when people are basically doing some shenanigans. You have a situation where people are accorded opportunity to now have a massive, vast people from across the country to come in to show what? At the end of the day, you are popular within the grassroots of the party. You are not, you are not. And those that are trying too hard to show these crowd are the ones that, for me, you can tell there's question mark on certain things. Okay, Dr. Efria Akoto went with a few people, chairman of the party. Why not? Like I said, for me, I will probably go with a few people and just submit my form. I don't need to bash people from all across the country.
When are you doing that?
Look, I was supposed to do that this morning, but I'm told that the party executives are not around. They are going to ascend north. I'm going to touch base with them again this morning because I saw a missed call on my phone last night. So I don't know whether there's been a change of schedule, but everything is ready. All my forms, all my documents are ready. I just need them to be there and I'll submit my forms. So if they are there this morning, I'll just go with a few crowd of people, my secretary and a few people to just go and submit. The crowd thing for me is just not necessary.
Okay. Let's wrap the conversation this morning as we look at the Finder newspaper, and then I'll get into the Hawk newspaper as well. Boakye Agyarko files form wants aspirants violating rules punished. That story is on page 9. $6 billion bank inadequate to finance growth. President Akufo-Addo rallies support for Afrexim Bank. And then the Hawk newspaper, importers tell OSP, tax collection is not your job. So let me just wrap with this. You would have less than a minute to respond, but let me just get into it and then we'll be out of here. So flag bearer hopeful of the MPP, Boakye Agyarko, has urged the party to take action against candidates in the flag bearership race who are disregarding the electoral rules. He emphasized the importance of upholding the rules and regulations for a fair and transparent electoral process. He says it is important that all candidates uphold the rules and regulations without sounding like a fly in the jar. There have been many provocations. There have been many breaking the rules for which no sanctions have been applied. I have even raised the matter at the National Council. How do you feel about that? And there's also this talk about the OSP on page 9. The Importers and Exporters Association of Ghana has declined the Office of Special Prosecutor's request to access the ICOMS platforms used at the ports. According to the association, the ICOMS platform contains sensitive data of importers, exporters, and business operators, and they fear that any mishandling or breaches of the data could negatively impact the business community. You have some 40 seconds to share your thoughts.
Basically, look, again, a good sword should cut both ways.
Right.
So the party hierarchy and the national executive of the party should make sure that what applies to Kofi is what is good for the geese is good for the gander. Let's apply the rules evenly. For me, what the call Mr. Agyarko is making is well. We should make sure that we stick to the rules, and if somebody violates it, doesn't matter who it is, the person is punished accordingly if there is any such sanctions prescribed in our constitution. The bit about the documentation, Look, if it's sensitive information, it's sensitive information. I think the Right to Information Act, if that's what the person is going through, had some exemptions on which documents you can access and what information you can access. But Ben, I wanted us to touch a little bit on this GMPC saga. It's unfortunate we didn't start early.
We have very limited time, so you have to round up on that quickly, please.
Well, yes, I think the public should. There's been a lot of voodoo mathematics and calculation being put out there by a section of the the civil society organization, which I'm a part of. And to me, I think that it's unfair for anybody to suggest that as a refinery sitting there like Tema Oil Refinery, somebody can go in there and make $700 million a year. If you can make $700 million a year for Tema Oil Refinery, we will not be in the IMF. So please, I think we should just disregard those voodoo calculations being perpetrated on Twitter and in some parts of the media.
Okay. And Safwa Poku Kojo, I wish you the best of the day, and we look forward to when you'll be filing your forms. Kojo Poku is an energy analyst.
I will give you a ding if I decide to do it today.
All right. Thank you very much. This segment brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. They're offering free prostate screening, free female fertility screening. Locate them here in Accra at Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard. Kumasi Krodumabwe here, behind the Angel Educational Complex. Takrady Anaji State, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswe and Siama Nzema. If you'd like to call them, which I prefer you do, reach them on 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. Sports is up next with the latest on that terrain. Do stay.
Good morning. Welcome to AM Sports here with me, Muftao Nabila Abdullah, former communications director of the Ghana Football Association. Ibrahim Sani Dara has called on Ghanaians to stop underrating Ghana's opponents. According to him, that every single national team in the continent has developed and they are very strong and have got the capabilities of qualifying to participate in the continent's biggest sporting festival. Hence, he says that the Black Stars' draft performances witnesses against Central African Republic, 2 times against Angola and Madagascar should not be one that will let Ghanaians say that the Black Stars is not good enough.
Dynamics of football in Africa has completely changed. There's no country today. You spoke of Rigobert Song. Look at the experiences he's had as a player, playing for Liverpool, captaining Cameroon national team to the World Cup, to helping them win the African Cup of Nations and all of that. And him taking his badges and becoming a coach. And look at the quality of players they have littered all over the world. So it tells you that, if Cameroon has a difficult result, you need to look at the opponent well.
The same Cameroon, Sonny, the same Cameroon that beat Brazil, at the last World Cup.
Yes, absolutely. And you find that this same Cameroon will come on the continent and will be struggling against, a team would consider an also-ran in African football. That is because the game has changed completely. Everybody is wiser. Everybody is investing more in getting more coaches. Everybody is investing in getting performance analysts to monitor their players abroad to see who are doing well. People are building up their domestic leagues and all. So this goes to actually buttress the point that, look, football is no longer what it is in the past, and we need to focus on what we have and also take our opponents more seriously than we've done in the past, and stop harping too much on our history. This will take us forward.
History is the reason why Ghana has not been able to actually lay its hands on maybe a major trophy, because it is the genesis of the fans' expectations. That's what Ibrahim Sani Dara, former communications director of the Ghana Football Association, was saying. In 2018, the Ghana Football Association appointed former Black Queens coach, former FIFA referee, Mercy Togo as the head coach of the senior female national team. She led the Queens to win the WAFU B Maiden Women's Cup of Nations, defeating Nigeria in the grand finale 1-0. However, in November that year, she was made the assistant coach of the team, and the team struggled in the Women's Cup of Nations, which was staged in Ghana. She says that she still got unfinished business with the Black Queens, and the highest point she's looking at is to ensure that she gets the opportunity of qualifying the Queens to participate in the FIFA World Cup.
I've not yet, before I say anything, I'll say I've not yet self-actualized.
Abraham Maslow.
Yes. Self-actualization has not yet happened, trust me. It was my ambition to be able to qualify this team. You remember the last time Ghana qualified to the World Cup? Do you remember?
2007.
Long, way back.
Yeah, I remember that. In fact, I watched that tournament.
It was my aim to do everything that I could when I was with the team to qualify. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But along the line, I was compensated as an individual, because I'm a coach, I'm talking about myself, to win a WAFU maiden edition, which is there forever. Whenever WAFU Zone B is mentioned, my name will never be out of it. But then, I'm not looking at me as an individual. I'm looking at Ghana as a whole.
As a country.
As a country. I wanted Ghana to qualify. But only God knows why we could not achieve it. And it is my prayer. It shouldn't be me. It should be anybody who picks up Black Queens. God should just help whoever to qualify Ghana to the World Cup that we've been all yearning for, so that Ghanaians will be happy.
What coaching career would you say you've self-actualized, since you said you've not self-actualized?
At what point
would you say that I have self-actualized?
Yes, that point is when if I had been able to qualify Ghana to the World Cup, I would then say yes. First woman to coach Black Queens. First woman to win a cup. No matter how the cup was or how I won it, I won WAFU. Maiden edition. First woman to do that. First woman to coach Black Queens to qualify to the World Cup. It's never come to pass.
Was it still an ambition?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. If I get the opportunity again, I'll do everything that I can to make sure that we qualify.
The people of Sunyani Municipal will now have an opportunity of also playing or developing talents on AstroTurf following the cutting of a sod for the construction of a facility in the Sunyani municipality on Monday. The Member of Parliament for Sunyani is Kwesi Ameyo-Chirme, says it is part of his aim of providing the necessary infrastructure that will help develop talents in the area. This is a report put together by my colleague Precious Semevo.
Pemkwasi Sakura Park is located in a suburb of Sunyani, a park which has produced many football talents like Sadiq Adams and Efri Aqua. But these young footballers in 2023 continue to play on this grassless pitch. Danousu is a legend of the newly promoted Premier League side, Baffour Agyeman-Duah and the Black Stars.
It's bad because normally, even the young ones, those who are below 10 years and 12 years, they have to learn how to play football. But if he continues training on this pitch, he cannot be a good footballer. He needs a pitch more than once. So the Sakura Park, in fact, is dangerous. You can have a lot of injuries on the pitch.
To uplift the standard of the pitch, the Sunyani East MP and board chairman of Bui Power Authority, Kwesi Ameyo-Chirme, brokered a deal for the construction of a 5.5 million cedis AstroTurf financed by the authority.
We love football and we need to get the infrastructure for football. I thought that we must do our best to uplift the status of the field. And by God's grace, we are able to provide an ultra-modern AstroTurf for the good people of Pemkwasi in particular and Sunyani in general.
Wembley Sports Construction Company Limited has 6 months to finish the edifice. Simon Lamte is the head of construction.
What we have here is a full FIFA-approved 11-a-side football pitch.
The size is 68 by 105 meters. It also comes with a floodlight, 500-seater spectator stand, and the VIP sitting area. We also have a mesh fencing around it. Wembley is known for quality, and we don't have any plans of slowing down anytime soon. When we started construction, we bring our professionals from Accra, and then we employ some of the indigenes from here, not just to work, we train them as well, so that when we are done with the project and we stay for 6 months, that is the retention period, we train them for the maintenance. So when we are done and we leave, they can continue with the maintenance of the project.
At the sword cutting for work to commence, witnessed by the chiefs and people of Sunyani, Mr. Miacheme said the project will help bring back the love of football in the community.
I think they will wholeheartedly welcome the project. If you look at the numbers around, it tells you that people have been waiting, have been expecting, have been hoping for this kind of infrastructure. I am happy that I am able to help. As the GFA keeps telling us that we should bring back the love. It's a contribution to bringing back the love for our game. That's why I'm appealing to Nananom, everybody, whatever we can do to support the timely completion of the project, we have to do it. I will do my part. Media people, you do your part.
Bono Regional Sports Development Officer Foster Boache commended the Sunyani East MP for his efforts to develop talent. Precious Semevo, Joy Sports, Sunyani.
And we wrap up with Euro qualifiers, and England, they defeated Macedonia 7-0. Arsenal's winger Saka scored 3 times as the Three Lions walloped and humiliated Macedonia. And France also won 1-0 against Greece. It was Kylian Mbappe who converted from the penalty spot to hand them the victory. And this is our wrap up AM Sports here with me, Baffour Agyeman-Duah.
As foreign liquidity began to dry up, exposing the weakness in Ghana's economic fundamentals, the only option was for Ghana to turn to the IMF for a bailout package. Professor Bopin sounded the alarm bells. He said going to the IMF was inescapable.
I personally don't think that the IMF is a long-term solution to our problems. And the reason I say so is that we've been there 16, 17 times. Is that okay? And practically every 3 years and some few months, we've had to go to the IMF and all of that. But as we always say, what takes us to the IMF has to do with the fundamentals. And as we sit right now, everything points to that.
The calls to register for an IMF bailout became intense.
After seeing Article 4, after seeing the COVID report, Article 4 2019 and the COVID report, and seeing the fiscal gap which is there, that was when I expressed the view that maybe it's time for us to go, that's how far back, to go to the fund, because it's not just about COVID. But we got all the COVID money, as I said already, and we could have used it to make a correction. Because the COVID money we got for ECF was 913 or so, million US dollars. Here you're talking about 6 billion. Why was it not sufficient to do the correction? Something fundamentally wrong.
Government's position was very simple. No IMF program. It has so much hope in using domestic means to turn the nation's economic fortunes around.
We are not going to the IMF. Whatever we do, we are not. The consequences are dire. We are a proud nation. We have the resources. We have the capacity. Don't let anybody tell you.
In the raging storm, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta was insistent that government wouldn't subscribe to an IMF program.
If because of political pride and the rest of them we don't want to go, that is a different thing altogether. It should not be our first resort. But we have not demonstrated that on our own we'll be able to impose a fiscal consolidation that would elicit the appropriate response from duty bearers. As whereas we have seen in our relationship with the fund. If we could do that, why not? For 60-something years of independence, we can't keep going to the IMF. Anytime we go to the IMF, I feel that I feel we've lost something, right, as a sovereign country and the rest of them. But IMF doesn't impose itself on any country. Through countries' own actions and inactions, mismanagement of the economy and the rest of them takes them to the IMF. So if we arrive at that point where homegrown solution has probably failed to get at the same result, we'll do that. I believe that in 2014, when the government made a call to the IMF, it wasn't because it was their first resort, right? Yeah, the fundamentals dictate so.
My position has always been, once the government, on our behalf, whether I like it or not, says we are not going to the IMF, then my position changed. Then show as alternative.
IMF cannot save us, right? Because we've done IMF 16 times, getting to 17 times now. We were on an IMF program for the best part of this government until recently, right? Up to the end of 2018, this government was on an IMF program. The good thing, though, in that respect, is that it does show that being an IMF program imposes more discipline. Because this government itself argues that all the way until early 2019, they were doing brilliant. What that means is that they were doing brilliant during the IMF program. That's an important point. So to make the case as if IMF is a problem is strange. If you did IMF from 2017 all the way to end of December 2018, and the economy was doing well as per your own analysis, then what is the argument anymore about IMF being a poison or a toxic element that you need to avoid? The government's attitude tends to be that, oh, we don't need IMF because IMF is bad in a way. They don't say it directly, but it implies that it's bad. And I'm arguing that from 2017 January, when they came into power, to 2018 December, that's 2 years, they were running an IMF program. Now, when you ask them about their financial track record and their performance, the government likes to say that until COVID hit, we're doing brilliant. And I'm saying that if that track record is one you are so proud of, you did that under an IMF program.
Despite government's insistence, the honorary vice president of Imani Africa, Bright Simmons, was hopeful government's best bet was seeking an IMF support. But beyond the political ego, was there any historical experience preventing government from approaching the IMF for liquidity support?
During 2018, when you were under an IMF program, you were growing at 8.3%, right? You were doing fantastically well on inflation. Exchange rate was stable, right? We did not see massive unemployment based on some IMF restrictions or whatever it is that you've been calling it. You did the IMF program for 2 years. We know these are some of the reasons why you don't like the IMF. In April 2018, the government was forced to acknowledge that it lied to the IMF about its external arrests and was forced to apologize, right? You have to write to the managing director of the IMF and apologize that somehow you forgot whatever, some data was not there, blah, 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 blah. Of course, that is why you don't like the IMF, because that extra discipline, that extra scrutiny may not be something that is to your liking, but we have to look beyond your ego and think about a country. Yes, the IMF will insist that you disclose the data. You will not be able to play the games that you play with us here, where you say something, where is the data, you refuse to disclose the data. They will insist. So that might not be very pleasant for managers in the government, but that does not mean that it's against the national interest. We should distinguish between IMF program elements that may not benefit Ghana, of which nowadays there are not that many because you yourself have to come up with a proposal and you yourself have to negotiate it. And then IMF program elements that may not benefit the government, ministers and officials that may be responsible for designing and implementing it. I think the two are not on the same scale. And while the IMF will not transform Ghana, while the IMF will not change Ghana's fortunes dramatically, our argument is that it's no worse from the things that's already happening.
Thank you for staying with us. We get into our big stories now, and of course you know that we're focusing on our economic trajectory, how we ended up here knocking on the door of the IMF. It has opened up to us, but what are the elements that brought us here and what is the way forward? A Nation That Begs is our latest Hotline documentary, and in this second installment, parts of which you saw, snippets of which we just showed you, we've titled it Hero to Zero. Joining us for a conversation on why we've fallen from grace to grass, Dr. Priscilla Twumasi Baffour. She's a senior lecturer, Department of Economics at the University of Ghana. We also have Dr. Richmond Etuahene. He is a banking consultant. Also on board this morning, Dr. Theo Echampong is an economist and risk analyst. And we also have Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah, former UN Senior Governance Advisor. Gentlemen, so far, those that I can see, at least Prof. Dr. Theo Echampong, a very good morning to you both.
Morning. Good morning. And thanks for having me here.
Thanks for joining us. We're grateful. We're grateful that every time we call you gentlemen, busy as you are, you take the time to join us. I see Dr. Priscilla Twumasi Baffour as well. A very good morning to you, madam. Hello, Doc? Doc, can you hear me? Dr. Priscilla?
Yes, I can. Good morning. Yes, I can hear you.
Great. It's good to have you. So just to kickstart the conversation, I'll give each one of you a bite of just very brief bites, less than a minute, and then I'll focus on Dr. Priscilla Twumasi Baffour because she has to run a little early this morning. So I'll give her ample time, gentlemen, to expand on her thoughts before she takes leave of us. Then the rest of us will delve deep into the conversation. So initial thoughts on why we've ended up here time without number, the rhetoric that has not been backed by action, and what you're seeing currently. Watchers of our economy say we're doing the same old things we've always done, and that another IMF program after this one is a likelihood. What are your thoughts on these? I'll start with you, Dr. Priscilla Twumasi Baffour.
Thank you very much, and good morning once again to my fellow panelists and your listeners, viewers. Essentially, when you look at the trajectory of Ghana's economy, not much really is changing in terms of tracking it from a historical perspective. Why am I saying yes? There is evidence that there's structural transformation, but this structural transformation, which is should be coupled with a lot of productive activity, we do not find that. You see that the structural transformation is service-led, and most of the service-led activities are also informal in nature. So essentially, the structure has changed from agricultural dependence into service-led. But in terms of the formality or informality of the economy, it hasn't changed much. Over 80% of the Ghanaian economy is still largely informal. And so when you look at, for example, where people work, you find that 12% of the labor force work in the public sector, about 16% work in the private sector. The rest are in the informal sector. The challenge with the informal sector is that it is very difficult to tax the informal sector, particularly when it comes to direct taxes. So in that regard, you find that our tax revenue in terms of personal income taxes are very low. We are not able to cover. If my memory serves me right, I think the people who pay income taxes would be about less than 1.5 million out of the whole labor force of almost 10 million. And so essentially that, why am I emphasizing so much on this? We are looking at the struggle for the country to generate enough revenue. And here, the revenue we are looking at tax revenue. And then when you come to what do we call it, in terms of our resources, you see that most of the agreements we've signed are not too favorable to the Ghanaian economy in the sense that we do not generate much. The reason being that you see that a lot of the times there's a huge investment outlay that is expected to exploit these resources. So usually as a developing country wanting to attract foreign interest, would usually give them very favorable deals. But the question is, these deals, these agreements keep expiring and we renew them consistently. So why have we as a country not made a lot of changes so that the country stand to gain from its mineral resources? And bear in mind, these mineral resources are not renewable. And so essentially, I mean, in this day and age of climate change as well, you find that it comes with a lot of hazardous environmental impact. And the society suffers. We do not get much. And essentially, you find that revenue is a problem. Then when you come to the expenditure side, we are also dealing with a situation where now our politicians come out with a lot of promises. So the electorates are also in anticipation, constantly in need and demanding the promises that have been rolled out before elections. And so government is compelled to spend. And even with the expenditure, given that we are not generating enough resources, that you do not find a lot of prudence as well in terms of the expenditure side. Why am I saying you find a lot of government uncompleted projects that have been left for years and for monies to go waste? And sometimes you ask yourself, if these were private entities, I don't think that the resources would have been managed that way. And so in short, we are struggling to generate revenue. On the other hand, expenditure, we are not too prudent with it. And so consistently, governments run budget deficits. And so the budget deficit needs to be financed. How have we financed these budget deficits over the years? Certainly through borrowing. And borrowing, we would borrow either from the domestic market or from the external market. In recent times, external borrowing had become a very important source of foreign currency inflows, and as much as a very important support for our budgets. But you see that external sources also come with its issues, particularly commercial loans, because that is where credit agencies would come in. I see that the president is not too happy about rating agencies, but certainly that is their job. If you open up your economy to the market, you are susceptible to speculations on the market. So the responsibility is on you to keep your fundamentals right so that you would always have some good ratings to continue to have access to the market. And so Ghana was locked out of the international capital market. And based on all the shocks we've gone through, we find that the system could not hold.
Right.
And so essentially, we had to go back to the IMF again for another 17th program. And so when you look at it in terms of our journey on with IMF and all that, you also find that most of the times we get the program, the resources come in, we start right by keeping fiscal discipline and all that. But then you find that structural reforms that we are expected to get to work to change the pattern, the nature of the economy, our level of import dependence, the fact that we are still so reliant on export of primary commodities. We do not get to work in those programs. And essentially, I must also indicate that working for structural reforms also takes time. And then sometimes you find that politicians are quick to salvage quick gains that have been made. And so nobody pays a lot of attention to these structural reforms. So you find that the slightest shock after the program, then we are back again on our knees.
Thank you for those initial comments. Let me quickly bring in Dr. Theo Echampong. What would be your response to say, as Dr. Priscilla Baffour has enumerated, she spoke about taxes, our tax system, and how it's not necessarily serving our purpose. We'll be delving into the bit about taxes a lot more later on. We're talking about projects that remain uncompleted. We're talking about structural reforms and all of that. But for you, why do we keep ending at the doorstep of the IMF, Doc?
Good morning. Pleasure to be here. And I largely side with a number of the points that Priscilla has made. In fact, I've actually got a book here that the title is The Economy of Ghana 60 Years After Independence, right? And this was edited by Professor Ernest Aite and Ravi. And in fact, a lot of the things we're discussing, the solutions are actually here without talking too much, right? Because if you take your time to study the Ghanaian economy and all that has happened over the period, fundamentally, for me, it comes down to two things. The fact that the export base of the economy has barely changed in the last 70 or 60 years. You still got gold, you still got cocoa, and most recently we've got oil, but we're not really doing much in terms of adding value. And that's the point that Priscilla started with. Then on top of that, we've also got these external factors, so to say, right? So you can have these commodity price shocks, and it can be positive or negative if they go up or if they come down. You also got the financial shocks, so in the sense that Ghana's economy increasingly has become much more integrated with what happens with the broader global economy. And anytime you have issues such as COVID or Russia, Ukraine, or things like that, of course you're going to feel it. Then the third element of the shock really is what I call, it's tied to the electoral cycle, right? So electoral shocks. And Priscilla talked again about this, where you tend to see a lot of out of control government spending that is really not tied into creating value for money or fundamentally transforming the structure of the economy. So if you have an economy that is still largely primary commodities, right, producing, but at the same time, you have this massive informal setup within it, and you've got the revenue issues, and then you add on top of that these big external shocks, then every couple of years, you're just going to end up going to the IMF for one support or the other. And the point is that these shocks, the external shocks, would always be there. I have argued that it's not even going to change. In the world that we live in now, we're going to have a lot more of these shocks. So fundamentally then, it comes back to what we do from a structural point to turn the economy around. And this is where you see that we go into these IMF programs, we start implementing the reforms for a year or two, we get out, and then we're not able to sustain it going forward. But like I indicated, a lot of the answers, and I actually, again, recommend this book to our policymakers. They should go read this book because the answers are there. The Economy of Ghana 60 Years After Independence.
Interesting that you talk about this. Sometimes it is said that our people read all the source material, and the Institute for Statistical and Social and Economic Research, for example, ISA of the University of Ghana, comes out with a lot of these from time to time. The CDD has come out with similar documents. Sometimes you wonder whether they are even read. That is a question maybe for the gods. But let me bring in Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah, former UN Senior Governance Advisor, also CEO of the John Agyeman-Duah Foundation. Thank you so much once more for joining the conversation. For you, from the governance end of things, yes, you can bring in the economics, but from the governance end of things, why do we keep getting here? Under former President Kufuor, we became HIPC. We saw some of the largest debt. Around that time in Africa, we were the second largest in terms of our debt to GDP forgiveness. The billions. We had a clean slate. After that, we've ended up at the doorstep of the IMF another 2-3 times. The question is, why? What is your take?
Well, thank you. And I'm glad my colleagues, Theo and Priscilla, have laid out their comments from the economist perspective. And you referring to President Kufuor, the HIPC and all, one thing we always forget is that he inherited a bankrupt economy in 2001. Nobody wants to go back to that era because those 11 years plus the additional 8 years under the Rawlings really bankrupted the country. That's a naked fact. That's why people have to run to the IMF and together. But coming directly to your question, you see, from a different angle, I think it's easy for our leaders to go to the international market and borrow. It's so easy for them. So unfortunately, they tend to forget, or they tend to think of how Ghana can become a truly independent country. Why do I say this? You see, Ghana has a very interesting history and a reputation, globally speaking. And oftentimes, the world, or these countries that give us money, have certain sympathy for Ghanaians. Secondly, they also know that the country is rich in mineral resources, and therefore we have a resource base that will make it possible for us to borrow, even though 17 times we borrowed and we find ourselves in a mess. Then I think, don't forget, Ghanaians are very good friends in most of these multilateral institutions, and including Ghanaians themselves who have risen to very high levels in these areas. So it's much easier for governments to contact their friends and get some money. Above all, I think creditors see loans as part of the global system to continuously enslave countries like Ghana. Okay? So if you put all this together, I think our leaders tend to be numbed by the easiness with which they can contract loans.
A very important point you made. Let me just take you up briefly on that. Are you saying then that the IMF, the Bretton Woods institutions, are a disincentive for our leaders in terms of putting on their thinking caps and getting our economy running? You know, if you have only one Ghana cedi, and you know that one Ghana cedi is everything you have, you don't have options. You will not want to spend 3 Ghana cedis. In fact, you don't have it. You know, there's no manna coming from anywhere. So you would be constrained to work within those parameters. And that's how you build on. Are you saying our leaders have been spoiled by these Bretton Woods institutions and that actually they are a form of disincentive?
Well, you said it in your own way. I use the term numbed. Our brains are numbed because it's so easy for them to go and get the money. Because how come, look, the piece that you showed to the whole world yesterday, and I think some part of it this morning, we heard from our former president, Mahama, almost swearing an oath, this will be the last time we will go, right, to the IMF. We also saw the current finance minister and our president also saying we will never go, right? And we can go back into our history and recall instances where our leaders have made such pledges. But the question becomes, why do they continue to go? I can tell you that in the coming years, with this government or any other government, Ghana will go back to the IMF only because we are incapable of putting our house in order. Look, all the conditions that the IMF gave, and Theo was referring to it is a book, edited book. We know this. In fact, today we are going to sit here to repeat many of the things that we have said in the past. And I think you made an interesting point, whether our rulers read such books or such material. I believe they do. Or maybe if they do, they don't understand the issues. Because it's all clear. Whenever you go, they give you conditions. And we keep going the 17th time. So what is wrong with our thinking caps? For me, that is, you see, they refer to so many things. The fact is that the structure of our economy does not address the fundamentals of our existence. I know politicians always delighting in throwing figures at us oh, we had a growth of 7%, 3%. GDP is that, inflation goes. That's all they are using. But these are, for me, superficials. Because we know these things and they don't help us. Okay? The fundamentals are simply what Nana Akufo-Addo said when he was campaigning for office. The gadgets-based economy that we need to change. I think he said it so nicely. The gadgets-based economy. And I think Priscilla referred to that. That is to say, for 70 years or so, continuing to be what we call raw material export economy. For 70 years, we've not been able to kind of create any significant manufacturing base in the economy, right? For 70 years, and I like it when Priscilla said it, we don't have control over our natural resources. Recently, we all learned we have signed a contract for lithium. Lithium is one of the most strategic minerals in the world. The government has signed a contract. I have not seen it. Maybe through the Freedom of Information Act, we should all find what contains in that contract. But of course, the ministers also said recently that now they are going to process, they won't allow raw materials to be taken. And I applauded him for that. Let us see what it is.
Okay.
We allow our minerals to be taken out. In fact, yesterday also in the graphic, in the center spread, Mineral Development Fund, we have created that to build schools or boreholes in villages. I mean, I think the way we are managing ourselves is simply the problem. We are not getting, fortunately, we are not getting leaders with foresight. This problem cannot be tackled in 4 years. Neither can it be tackled in 8 years. We need to have a long-term vision. And that's what we don't see. Because the political system itself compels our leaders to try to show what they can within 4 years. And that's not possible. Lee Kuan Yew told the whole world in his book that there's no shortcut to development. There is no shortcut development. Development requires a strategy over a period of time and working consistently towards achieving results.
Interesting point you make, and it took them just about 30 years to move from a third world country to a first world country. So continuity, like we're seeing in some way, I know there are problems, but in some way in Rwanda, if you look at 1994 and what happened and where they are now, comparatively where we were and where we are now, you would see that our fortunes have been very different. But let me bring in Dr. Priscilla Twumasi Baffour. I'm going to focus on you for just a little bit, about some 8 to 9 minutes so you can knock off. The first point, you made a point about tax regime. We've been talking about that this morning as well. What exactly is faulty with our tax regime? Because it appears we are overtaxing a certain sector and we are woefully undertaxing other aspects of the divide. Then again, there is the bit about the numerous taxes, like taxes slapped on sanitary products and all of that. How do we get our tax system right? And then secondly, tied to that, you spoke about abandoned projects, uncompleted projects. I think that is one major area. Throughout this Fourth Republic, there are roads we've been conducting or constructing for decades. Because one administration will start, it won't finish, the contractor will not go back to site, we have to re-award the contract, and so many dynamics. Now, we have Agenda 111. People have raised concerns about feasibility, cost, whether we'll complete them, and what happens to them. You remember the E-blocks. Then there is also the National Cathedral. How do you address these two issues, taxation and uncompleted projects? What do you see?
Thank you. Essentially, for the taxation, we see that because of it falls back to the structure of the economy. And so when you look at tax revenue with regards to whether it is direct taxes or indirect taxes, you find that for direct taxes, we do not do too well. And for direct taxes, you are looking at direct taxation of personal income taxes. I'm talking about income taxes. And the reason is that those in the formal sector constitute essentially about 25% of the labor force. And those are the people who pay direct taxes. And so you find that because we struggle to generate direct taxes from the majority of the labor market, which is the informal sector, our taxes are very heavy on indirect taxes. So the question you ask is, if we are not able to generate enough direct taxes through personal income taxes, what about other sources of direct taxes, such as a property tax, for example? So if somebody is working and making enough money and is not paying direct taxes because of the sector they are in, they would buy a property, so they live in homes. What about property taxes? Why can we not collect adequate property taxes to support the system, for example? Then there are other taxes. This government introduced luxury car tax, for example, that was taken out, I believe, essentially because of political issues. But we need to be very aggressive in terms of the collection of taxes, because a lot of the developed economies that we cite, they generate resources because governments do not do business. Government engine is oiled through revenue that is able to generate, and those revenues are mainly in our setting coming from taxes, given that we are not generating enough from our natural resources. Then you see that when it comes to the indirect taxes, that is where there is a lot of emphasis on, because you know that for indirect taxes, people cannot avoid the tax. So long as you consume a good, you pay VAT, for example. And when you look at taxes on petroleum products, there is a lot of taxes and levies that are put on there, because those are also sure avenues for the revenues to come in. The downside with being too heavy on indirect taxes is that indirect taxes disproportionately disadvantage the poor. And so why is that? If you put taxes on petroleum and then fuel prices go up and transportation goes up, the people that are taking the trotro, that are paying the high trotro fare, it constitutes a significant part of their income. But certainly to those that are driving the luxury cars, those taxes, they do not tend to feel it much. And so consistently, you see that government introduced a COVID levy. And now they are appealing to us to bear with them, because essentially, when the levy is taken out, it creates a huge hole in government budget. Where are they going to find resources to fill it? And it is all.
So are you suggesting, I mean, I've spoken to a number of analysts and experts. Are you suggesting the COVID-19 levy should stay? Until when? I would call it a nuisance levy as of this point in time, especially when even the World Health Organization has declared that we're out of a pandemic. Why do we still have it?
Certainly, I am not suggesting that it should stay. But if you look at the trajectory of taxation, the more the government succeeds in introducing a tax handle, it's very difficult for them to remove it. I mean, it will come in a different name, but certainly it is all because the way the structure is, it is difficult to get these things on. So once it comes in, you would find that at best, I'm sure I would not be surprised if, a name is given to the COVID levy, taken out of COVID, but probably some stabilization, something or something. And the point I am making is that because we are not generating enough, whenever a handle is placed in there and it becomes successful, it becomes very significant and difficult for government to take it out. So do not take me wrong at all. I am not advocating that it should be kept, but I'm indicating that it has become a significant source in the budget, and government will struggle in taking it out essentially. And so the point I am making is that when it comes to indirect taxes, that is where we are heavy on. And you indicated that the people that are in the tax net are consistently being squeezed. That is true.
Right.
Because the people that are in the nets are the ones that are majority are paying the direct taxes. They are also paying indirect taxes. E-levy was introduced. They are the same people that are actively in there transacting electronic transactions.
Right.
So essentially, something needs to be done to broaden the tax base. We should adopt technology and rope a lot of people in through payment of taxes, whether direct or indirect. But for me, my advocacy is that GRA should go in and be very aggressive in terms of the collection of direct taxes as well, so that everybody contributes a bit to the nation that we are all seeking to develop. And then on condition that
I have to come in, Doc, very quickly on this. We're constrained for time, unfortunately, so I'm going to constrain you to the next 2 minutes. I want you to do this for me. Address the issue with uncompleted projects. For example, what do you forecast with Agenda 111? Like Professor Binka has said, it's not feasible looking at the time. What do you forecast when it comes to the ratings agencies and basically what they've been saying and our response, the president saying they have been reckless? Please address those two for me in 2 minutes and we'll proceed from there. And then I can let go of you.
I do not, based on the situation we are in, I do not think that Agenda 111 is something that the government would be able to accomplish, essentially. And then with regards to...
And the National Cathedral?
I have my doubts, certainly. I have not really studied the financial... what do we call it, the sources of finance for National Cathedral, but I know that they are raising some funds here and there. Certainly, if anything is coming from the public purse, it will be heavily challenged.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Doc, for joining us this morning. We know you are on a time leash, but we're grateful that you took the time to join us. Let me now bring in Dr. Richmond Etuahene. He is a banking consultant. Doc, a very good morning to you. Hello, Dr. Etuahene. Dr. Richmond Etuahene, please unmute so we can hear you.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure having you join the conversation. You're joining after we've already spoken about, the IMF dynamics and all of that. But I'd like to put this to you. Professor Agyeman-Duah, who has joined the conversation, he's been with us from the start, has spoken about the fact that in a way, we are too poor in our thinking and implementation because we know we can always fall on Big Brother IMF. So we become enslaved in a way in terms of our thinking and our actions. That is the first point. I want you reflecting on that. And then I want you to look at the ratings agencies. Interestingly, around 2020, 2021, when they were giving us a clean bill of health, we subscribed to what they were saying. But ever since last year, they started criticizing, using the same methodologies they had used in 2020 and 2021 to criticize us. Then we started crying wolf. Recently, the president said they had been reckless in how they had assessed us. What is the reality of that? Very briefly, sir.
Thank you, Bon. I think what Prof has said is just true as anything. I think we have, let me use it. Is it myopic minds or what? If you've been there a place for 17, 16 times and you cannot develop your own economy by yourself and you always want to look for 3 billion to support it. I mean, what Prof has just said, I think he's even used a weaker word. I would possibly use a very terrible word for us because we seem not to be understanding where we are and we don't know where we are going. Every time we like on borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and we are not keeping that the export issues, develop the base where you have capacity. I mean, if I tell you, if you look at the BOP, the balance of payment, and you see the amount of gold, recently they say Ghana has been rated third, and you see the amount we get on it, it's peanut compared to South Africa. Why? Why can't we look at it, compare the resources of these gold retained on the BOP and the one that is taken over by these foreigners? So what Prof is saying is as true as anything, more than true that it's more than truth. I mean, I don't know what to say about what Prof has said. The way we think everything is about borrowing to consume. instead of borrowing to do capacity building or where your competitive and comparative advantages are, it is when you are hit, then you come back and say that we're going to stop, we're going to cultivate rice, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So what Prof. Agyeman is saying, I think for me, is fantastic. And Ghanaians to learn from what Prof has just said. And then on the rating, it's very sad, very, very sad. The very people who rated you to go to the market to borrow are now being called reckless. What is our, like Prof has just said, what's our way of thinking? And this methodology used is not only used for Ghana, it's used for like Cote d'Ivoire, it's used for Togo, it's used for Nigeria, it's used for every country. By the time you were seeking for money, you thought it was excellent. Now that you have run your economy down, mess it up, and somebody is just telling you that what you're doing is not right, we call them what? The comment seriously is, for me, it is just uncalled for. We should have kept our mouth shut and let the system find its own way. Because what we have done is not good for international image, international good. It's not good at all. So that is what I'll say, Ben.
Was there an alternative to the IMF program? We heard the likes of Seth Tekpe say that, look, we could dilly-dally, but once we came to that reality, we had to go there, which we did. We've also spoken about the issue of taxation. Some have said direct taxes, yeah, we may not be raking enough from there. Indirect taxes, everyone pays them. But when you look at the mix, especially as you're considering the banking sector, are we making the right moves? What do we do to regulate the system, get more people in, and ease the burden on the precious few? What do you see in that regard?
I think from what the economics will tell you that if the production base is great, taxes will automatically come. Unfortunately, those who have been paying and overpaying. So instead of looking at the production, expanding your production capacity, and then expanding the net, we seem not to think about that. The GDP debt tax ratio is 12.7, and now we are projecting to 18 by putting more taxes on people who are paying. It means you're killing the economy. You're killing the domestic economy because they will be cash trapped and they won't have money to expand the business. And the private sector cannot also borrow. And that is going to affect even your... And now, let me even chip in. If you take the telecos and you took the mining, the next line on taxes was the financial sector, especially the banking. Now that you have almost collapsed it, where are you going to get those financial stability tax, where they are going to corporate tax, where you're going to get the physical tax? All these things are gone because we have been reckless in managing the economy. It's as simple as that. We have not managed ourselves.
So in other words, the president calls the downgrades from the institutions, basically calling the ratings agencies reckless themselves. But you are saying that we rather have been reckless in how we managed our economy.
There's no two ways about that. You go and borrow externally. Forgetting about that, you don't have control over your exchange rates. You only borrow to show the exchange rate. You didn't borrow to improve the capacity, expanding cocoa, expanding cashew, expanding pineapple, and what have you. You borrow to consume. And when you borrow to consume, you borrow to pay from your nose. So for me, it is not the rating agencies. It is very unfortunate. It's not the rating agencies. If we have borrowed to expand the capacity like cocoa, increase cocoa from 1 million tons to 3 million tons, today we will not be sitting here and talking like that.
Right.
If you look at the gold sector, if we have actually looked at our contracts very well, like the South Africans do, you don't sign contract by 70-30 when people are doing surface mining. When AGC used to do the deep mining, it wasn't like that. I have a time to look at it in those days. It was 60-40, but now people are scrapping the surface and doing 70-20. I don't know who signed the contract.
Right.
And they are ripping the economy. They are ripping the economy. Ghana is, I'm told Ghana recently is the first. Ask us how much did we get? It is not more than cocoa or anything, but we want to be proud of it. And I'm saying that let us look internally Let us take this mediocrity, cronyism. I mean, these are things that are killed. Let us look at the base of what the East Far East did. They do that meritocracy. Meritocracy will build a country, not cronyism.
Okay.
Not, you see, other than that, we are not, Professor Baffour is a bit old, I'm a bit old. We will pass on. And what do we leave for the generation?
That is the question.
You and your great children. What are we leaving behind? Is that what the forefathers said we should do? No.
Let me, I love the passion with which you're speaking, and I hear a lot of senior citizens sounding same, saying that, Ben, you and your generation, you will come and inherit all the nonsense, all the recklessness, and what are you going to do with it? But as we wrap up the conversation, I'd like to come to you, Dr. Theo Champong, for 2 quick points, and then, gentlemen, we shall call it a wrap with your final comments. I'd like for us first to look at the state of our fiscal space currently. Ghana's fiscal position 11 months after the IMF program. What is your reading? And then again, as far as our external debt is concerned, we've dealt with the domestic debt situation with some little niggling bits. But experts are worried about the slow pace of process or proceedings in the external debt portfolio. In fact, Dr. Said Boache of the Institute of Fiscal Studies has been pointing to that. What are your quick takes on these 2 matters before we wrap up?
Yeah, so quickly on the fiscal space, the fact is that we're still in debt distress, and I'm sure others have talked about this issue. And the money that we're getting from the IMF is only a small drop in the ocean compared to what we actually need to close the gap. So for the gap for this year, if you actually look at the IMF's own assessment and part of what Ghana is asking for, we've got a financing gap of $4.2 billion that we need to close. Out of that $4.2 billion, this year we're going to get $1.2 billion from the IMF. We've already gotten $600 million. The other $600 million likely around November if we meet the program conditionalities. But then we have as much as $2.5 billion that would have to get from the restructuring of our external debt. So that's about 65% of what we need to close the gap for this year alone has to come from the benevolence of, these creditors. And of course, they are also not Father Christmas. So we should expect some really hard negotiation in the weeks and months ahead. I have already indicated that I think would struggle a little bit in terms of getting some of those concessions, and the $2.4 billion that we're looking for, we may not get all of it at the moment. But the fundamental issues to address on the economy and what my other senior colleagues have talked about is, look, and I'll wrap up with my comments here. We've been fixated, and Professor Jambafo made this point, we've been fixated too much on macroeconomic indicators, right? So we keep talking inflation, we keep talking GDP, we keep talking all these things, but we're actually not connecting it to the micro level and the structural transformation that needs to take place. That's a very important point that we need to correct. The other point about the politics and the cycle is something that, again, we need to fundamentally address. And in terms of the transformation, my final point, again, I want to reference us to, there's another book that I've got here that I quickly will highlight. This is the Gold Coast Handbook, a book that was written in 1937. And in this book, cocoa farmers, just after the 1929-30 crash in the US, started complaining about the fact that they were not getting much for their cocoa produce, to the point that some of them even marched down on the colonial government in Accra to demand better prices and more value addition.
Right.
You can look or read this book and you can actually come to the point that almost 90 years or down the line, the same issues, we keep talking about them, and the structural transformation is not happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. Prof, my sincere apologies, Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah. I have to constrain you to a maximum of about 30 seconds for your wrap-up. This would have wanted a bit more of a flow, but we are constrained. So please, what would be your final comments for us, Prof?
My final comment is just like Theo is doing, taking us back to history. Ghanaians do not learn our history. Look, there was a period in our recent history where the government never went to the IMF, 1972 to 78, Kutu Echampong. Despite all his failures, and I know he made some terrible mistakes, he never went to the IMF. And ask yourself why. Because of the domestic policies he initiated. Operation Feed Yourself, Operation Feed Your Industry, seeking 50% shares in our minerals in this country.
But today, while we are constrained for time, I just have to say this. Today, you can't go and say Yentia.
You cannot say Yentia, but you can do like my good friend Tuahin was saying. You sign contracts today like you signed it 30 years ago. Look, currently, Namibia has started renegotiating with companies that have been mining their minerals over the years. So we need some courage. We need some leaders with vision who can project where we want to be. Not these ad hoc promises that I heard somebody say his vision is to make Ghana a digital hub. Upon what basis? If your fundamentals are weak, then you create a digital empire. Where will it stand? Vision, 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 courage.
Thank you for joining the conversation. All of you for contributing. We had earlier Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Baffour, Senior Lecturer, Department of Economics at the University of Ghana. You just had Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah, CEO, J. Kufuor Foundation. There's also Dr. Theo Echampong, economist and political risk analyst, Dr. Richmond Etuahene, a banking consultant. We're so grateful that you took the time to join us this morning.